Okay, so ready to dive into something kind of mind-bending. We're talking about creativity today.
Yeah.
You know, that whole how do we come up with new stuff thing.
Always a fun one.
Right. And you sent over some research on this honing theory, and honestly, it's got me thinking about creativity in a whole new way.
It really challenges the whole aha moment thing, doesn't it?
Yeah. Like, we always hear about these bursts of inspiration, but honing theory says it's maybe less about a million ideas and more about, like, carefully shaping the few good ones.
Exactly. It's more like we each have this mental model of how the world works, right? Our own worldview, so to speak.
Okay, so based on our experiences, everything we've learned.
Yeah, and those worldviews, those are key to honing theory. It's all about how our own thoughts, like, bump up against new ideas we encounter. Every conversation, every book, they all have the potential to kind of reshape those internal models. And that's where those aha moments come from.
So our brains are always in this back and forth with the world, trying to make sense of things.
Exactly. And sometimes, those new pieces of information, they don't quite fit. Creates a kind of friction.
Oh, I know that feeling.
Right. And that, my friend, is what we call psychological entropy. That feeling of, wait, something's not adding up here, or maybe even just feeling bored. That's a sign it's time for a mental remodel.
Not just adding information, but like taking the whole thing apart and putting it back together in a way that makes more sense.
Now you're getting it. And that right there is the engine of creativity, according to this theory. It's not random, it's that drive to make things fit, to understand.
Instead of our brains being these random idea machines, it's more like they're detectives trying to crack a case.
And that's a key difference between honing theory and other models, like that whole Darwinian survival of the fittest idea concept. It's more deliberate. We don't just randomly come up with ideas. We're driven by this need for coherence.
To make the pieces fit.
Exactly. And this whole honing process, it's not just happening inside each of us, it's happening across cultures, over generations. We're all kind of bumping up against each other's ideas, shaping and reshaping our understanding of the world.
So it's this constant honing, always refining.
Yeah.
But what actually sparks those big creative leaps? Is it always like some life-changing event, or can it be something totally mundane?
That is a great question. It doesn't have to be some big dramatic thing, Honing theory shows us that those sparks, they can come from the most ordinary places.
Like seriously ordinary, like what?
Seriously, think about okay, picture a beat up old lampshade. The kind you find shoved in a closet somewhere.
Covered in dust and cobwebs.
Exactly. Most people look at that and think, trash. But someone with that creative itch, that gotta figure this out feeling, they might see something totally different.
Possibilities instead of just junk.
There you go. Suddenly that lampshade could be, I don't know, a planter, a birdhouse, modern art. Who even knows? It's about shifting perspectives.
Seeing potential where other people just see a lampshade.
And that's where these states of potentiality come in. That lampshade, it's not just a lampshade anymore, right? It's this bundle of possibilities just waiting to be explored. It's kind of like when you're stuck on a problem and then boom, the solution hits you while you're like washing the dishes or something.
Happens to me all the time.
That's your mind working behind the scenes, making those connections. But here's the thing, it's not enough to just have those half-formed ideas floating around. You have to actually do something with them. That's where the honing comes in.
Molding them, shaping them, seeing what works.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Turning those rough ideas into something, actually meaningful. And the cool thing is, this isn't just for artists or whatever, it's everyone. That chef trying out a new recipe, they're honing their craft. That programmer trying to debug code, same thing. Even a parent explaining something to their kid in a new way. It's all honing.
Makes you wonder, though, if this whole honing thing, the way we each see the world, is it different for different parts of our lives? Like, I might be super creative in the kitchen, but ask me to fix a lamp, forget it.
That's what's so interesting about the research you sent over. It actually kind of goes against that idea of creativity being like stuck in one area. Our personal style, the way we hone our worldview, it can show up in surprising places.
So my killer guacamole recipe could mean I'm secretly a woodworking genius. I don't know about that.
Well, maybe, maybe not. But think about it like this. Say you've got a musician, someone known for these really intricate melodies, right? This research suggests that same kind of complexity, that style, it might show up in other parts of their life too. Maybe they write these super intricate stories, or maybe they're a chef who comes up with these crazy flavor combinations.
So even if they aren't like experts in everything, there's this thread, this style that runs through it all.
Right, like a creative fingerprint. You can take the musician out of the band, as they say, but that musicality, it's still there.
It's like a fundamental part of how they see the world.
Exactly. It's not just skills, it's deeper than that. It's a way of thinking.
Okay, so we've seen how this whole honing thing works for each of us, right?
Mhm.
But what about, like, the big picture? If everyone's out there refining their worldview, how does that shape culture, society as a whole?
Mm.
Seems like it could get kind of messy.
It's a good question, and it gets to how honing theory explains how cultures actually change over time. You're right. If everyone was just constantly coming up with wild new ideas, things would fall apart pretty quickly.
Right, we need some shared ground, right?
Exactly. We need those solid ideas that have, stood the test of time. And honing theory says that cultures evolve through this process. It's called punctuated equilibrium, basically long periods of stability, and then bam, these bursts of change.
So like those aha moments, but for society.
Right. Imagine it like this. You've got this whole landscape of ideas, right?
Yeah.
And for a long time, things are pretty stable. Knowledge gets passed down, refined a little here and there. But then someone comes along with a really groundbreaking idea, something that really shakes things up.
And people latch onto it.
Exactly. And that one idea, it can trigger a whole wave of change.
Like a ripple effect.
And those ripples, those big shifts, they often come from people who've, you know, really honed their worldviews in unique ways, the ones who can see those connections other people miss.
Makes sense. Like those big thinkers, the revolutionaries, they're the ones pushing things forward.
But it's not enough to just have those people. You also need a culture that's willing to listen to them, even when their ideas are, a little out there.
It takes both, right? The disruptors and the ones who figure out how to make those ideas work for everyone else.
Exactly. It's a balance. So how do we actually use this stuff, this honing theory, in our own lives? First thing, don't be afraid of that psychological entropy, that feeling of, wait, what? That's a good thing. It means your brain's working, trying to make sense of things.
So next time I'm feeling stuck, instead of like going down an internet rabbit hole,
Embrace the confusion. Ask yourself, what am I missing here? What if I looked at this a different way? Don't be afraid to try things out, see what happens.
it's about staying curious.
And remember, talk to people. Get different perspectives. You never know what's going to spark that next aha moment. So yeah, stay curious, embrace the unknown, and trust that your brain, it's more powerful than you think.
So much to think about. That's it for today's deep dive on honing theory, but hey, here's something to ponder. If our minds are always evolving, always being shaped by new ideas, what does that mean for the future? What amazing things will we create? Thanks for joining us on the deep dive.